as we welcome in a very special guest this half hour. He is the author of Minority Rule, the right-wing attack on the will of the people and the fight to resist it. Also a voting rights reporter for Mother Jones and many other things, a man of many talents, Mr. Ari Berman. Ari, thanks so much for being on the show and welcome in.
Hey, Todd. Hey, Trygve. Great to see you guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's good to see you too.
Well, it's a real pleasure. I'm a fan. I'm always if I've gotten through books, I say it. I'm about a quarter of the way through this one, and it's absolutely fantastic.
Did you check? You have not seen your cameo yet, have you?
I have a cameo in the book. No,
I have a cameo
not.
in the book. You do
oh my
indeed.
Gosh, good Lord!
The man who blew the whistle.
Oh well, there you go. Yes, that's a whole other bottle of wine, as they say. But what I like about this, and I want you to tell us in your own words how you came to write this. Right away, this quote, you open it up and it says, "The supreme issue involving all others is the encroachment of the powerful few upon the rights of the many." A quote from our very own Robert Fighting Bob LaFollette from 1913. How did you come to write this, Ari?
Fighting Bob. See, there you go.
Yeah.
This is I did my Wisconsin research for this one.
Yeah.
But so I've been covering the issue of voting rights for more than a decade, which is how we first came to talk, Todd. And after I started covering all these new restrictions on voting, I began to ask myself, what's the purpose of all this? Is it just to try to gain some kind of political advantage, or is there some larger project behind it? And I realized that the larger project was minority rule, that there was this radical right-wing movement that was a minority of the population, but they wanted to control a majority of power through things like voter suppression and gerrymandering. And that seemed really dangerous to me. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to show how Trump was certainly an accelerant to the democratic crisis that we face, but it was also a product of a broken political system, and that the problems that we're facing go deeper than just Trump. And in fact, they go back 230 years to how the Constitution was set up, but more recently, they go back to what people like Scott Walker and the Republican Party did in Wisconsin, and how that really laid the groundwork for the radicalization of the Republican Party, which led to Trump and has, of course, gotten even more extreme since then.
We'll go back to Scott Walker, one of Trygve Olsen's favorite subjects, in just a minute. But I want to ask you this because it's a question that Trygve and I have both gotten individually. It's a question that we get from listeners and viewers on this show, and they say, Todd, Trygve, as former Republicans, where did things start going south? Where did the party of Lincoln go wrong? And you mentioned this right away in the book. There's a through line here, it appears to me, and it's Pat Buchanan. Explain.
I think there's lots of different points in which you can say the Republican Party went wrong. I start in the 1990s with Pat Buchanan because he starts to voice the fear of the changing demographics of the country. And he starts to say, we are entering this majority-minority future in which white people will one day be the minority in the country, and we have to do something about it. And he quite literally, this is back in 1992 and 1996, he calls for building a Buchanan Wall along the U.S.-Mexico border, stopping immigration, repealing things like the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. And the interesting thing is, he's thought of as a radical within the Republican Party at the time, and he's pushed aside by people like Bob Dole, who stand up for a more moderate Republican Party. But I think if you look at these kind of figures, not just Buchanan, but other people like him, they start shifting the conversation to the right in the Republican Party, and they start laying the groundwork for Trump. And at some point, the Republican Party believes that instead of trying to win over the changing demographics of the country, they have to stop those changing demographics from having an impact on the political process. So I trace it back to the 1990s, and I think it's just accelerated since then. And I think Trump has very clearly made that a centerpiece of the campaign in terms of his racism, his nativism, and the white resentment that he continues to fuel through his actions and his rhetoric.
Trygve Olsen, your colleague at Lincoln Project, Stuart Stevens, has written in his book along the same lines, going back to Buchanan's involvement with Nixon and kind of, having this fear of, to Ari's point, this minority or majority and basically like, oh my gosh, we might not be as white as we might been. You've worked all over the world on behalf of democracy. You've seen this in other countries. Talk to that a little bit, and whatever you have for Ari.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's right to start in the '90s, right? Like that's important. And you have some other electoral. The first person, it seems to me, and I would be interested in your take on this, Ari. Pete Wilson was in real trouble, and in California, that would have been about '94, right? And
Yeah.
he inversed himself. I think the other, and so that was kind of the first time somebody had political success with it. But simultaneous to that, Donald Trump really politicized and personified within our politics the rhetoric that was talk radio, that was Fox News, and so much of that was built on the other, and the obvious other is that changing demographic. And I have seen that around the world, and quite frankly, it's a toxic mix for creating extremism, right? The four psychological pillars, because it's distress, it's simplistic answers, it's overconfidence, and then it becomes intolerance towards those others.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think what you had is since the 1960s, you had the Southern strategy of Nixon, which was to try to create a backlash basically to the civil rights movement and to use these hot button issues to split apart white Democrats and to make them Republicans. That was very successful. It was still quite controversial in the party. You had people dissent from it, but that was definitely a strategy. I think what Buchanan did is he layered on opposition to the civil rights movement with opposition to immigration and demographic change more broadly. And that was pretty new within the party because Trygve, I'm sure you've watched this. There's this amazing debate between Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush back in 1980 when they're running against each other for president. And they're basically saying we should create a pathway to citizenship. We shouldn't demonize people who come from Mexico seeking a better life. I mean, it's incredible to watch this in the era of Donald Trump. So the Republican Party was still pretty much supportive of immigration, supportive of things like free trade. They wanted to be more a global party. Trump would call them globalist right now, but they were proud of that. They were proud of the idea that they were welcoming of people and they were standing up for American values and they were trying to assimilate new people into the country. And Buchanan sort of said, no, we have to build a wall against that. And I think, to me, the second real turning point is the election of Barack Obama in 2008. Because what happens is you see a much more diverse electorate in 2008. This is known as the coalition of the ascendant, right? It's going to be young people, people of color, more moderate whites joining together in this kind of rainbow coalition. And that starts to radicalize the Republican Party too, because they don't believe they can start winning over this new electorate. And of course, there's this whole debate over the 2012 election and the autopsy, which I write about in the book, which is, should Republicans embrace things like immigration reform? Should they try to court these new constituencies? Or should they try to turn their back on it and court more reactionary white voters? And clearly, the Trump part of that won the argument, right? Because you had Lindsey Graham and John McCain and Marco Rubio work on immigration reform, and then the House kills it. And then now you have, Rubio and Graham are some of the most enthusiastic supporters of Donald Trump right now. And so the whole party has shifted away from being a party that wants to open up its appeal to one that instead it is increasingly trying to make kind of race-based appeals, and actually making race-based appeals now to voters of color, which is the thing that Trump is doing, and apparently quite successfully in some cases. But in sort of, instead of embracing the future, going back to the past.
We are talking with Ari Berman. He is the author of his latest book here called Minority Rule, The Right-Wing Attack on the Will of the People and the Fight to Resist It. Have it right here in my hands, partway through. Cannot wait to get it finished here. You could get it wherever you buy your books. He is also a voting rights reporter for Mother Jones, makes frequent appearances on network and cable news shows around the nation. You've probably seen him. We're honored he's here. Ari, you're going to be here physically in the state of Wisconsin, I know, and you have a particular interest in Wisconsin. Tell us about that. What brings you to Wisconsin?
I do. So I'm going to be here on Friday, October 18th, speaking at the Wisconsin Book Festival in Madison, which is a great event. I'll be speaking with Wisconsin Public Radio for that. So hopefully people can come out. It's at the Madison Central Library. I'm also going to sneak in some campaign reporting while I'm in town as well. One of the things I'm really interested in about Wisconsin is Wisconsin became this model after 2010, after the Republican takeover in 2010 under Scott Walker, for restricting Democratic participation by passing new laws to make it harder to vote, really extreme gerrymandering, going after labor unions, things like that. And the interesting thing is that that was a model that Republicans replicated across the country. It's also something that has backfired in a lot of different ways and led to Democratic victories in a lot of places. And one of the fascinating things is those gerrymandered maps, of course, as you guys know, have been struck down, meaning there's competitive elections for the state legislature in Wisconsin for the first time in about a decade and a half. And that's a really interesting story to me because, of course, Wisconsin's a battleground for the president and the Senate and all of those races, but it's always a battleground for those races. Where it has not been a battleground is for the state legislature. And I think that's a really undercovered important story because the state legislature has really been the dominant institution in Wisconsin politics and shaping the direction of the state for the past 15 years. And now you have a situation where the state legislature, at least in the assembly, is up for grabs. And I think that's a really fascinating political story.
Well, and I want to go down this road right now because we're here to talk to you, but you brought it up. I mean, that's literally why I left the Republican Party in 2011, because I was witness to what people tried to deem as quote unquote voter ID bills. When I saw behind closed doors, it was specifically for voter suppression against black and brown people and college students across the state of Wisconsin. I said, peace out. That's not why I spent 30 years of my life. To your point, I mean, my very first race I volunteered on was 1980, and we've played that clip of Reagan and Bush, the first, on this show. And you're absolutely right, Ari. That's the party I signed up for in 1980, and it's very different today. But to your point you just made, I don't. It is lost. I think it is undercovered that if not for Tony Evers, Wisconsin right now politically would be Texas and Florida.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, in terms of what they've tried to do. And I think in many ways, Wisconsin might have provided the roadmap that places like Texas and Florida it followed in terms of enacting those kind of extreme policies. But the amazing thing is that Wisconsin is basically this 50-50 state that's decided by 10,000 to 20,000 votes in every single close election. But in the legislature, Republicans were closer to getting a supermajority than to being voted out of office under the maps that were passed. And I think that really warped the state from the fact that they would not repeal an abortion ban from 1849 to they won't do anything on healthcare or guns or education, where they're so clearly out of step with the rest of the state and governing, as you said, like they're in Tennessee or Mississippi, as opposed to being in a place like Wisconsin. So the fact that the legislature could be more moderate is, I think, going to change the politics of Wisconsin. We've seen the politics of Wisconsin change already in terms of who's been elected governor, attorney general, to the state Supreme Court, which is another thing that it has gotten changed a lot in the state. So I think Wisconsin's really been one of those places that people look to. And when Wisconsin is a state that is restricting Democratic participation, that has a ripple effect. And when Wisconsin is a state that is upholding Democratic participation, which it did for hundreds of years until, I would argue, Scott Walker and his allies took over, that has a ripple effect to other states as well.
Ari Berman has brought up the name Scott Walker, Trygve Olsen's favorite person to kick around. We'll do a little bit of that because there's a serious side. He deserves it. The thing is, the guy deserves it. Ari Berman is the author of this great new book, Minority Rule. We'll talk to Mr. Berman and also Trygve Olsen after this. Don't go anywhere. It's the Allbaugh Show right here across Wisconsin and around the world on the Civic Media Radio Network. Welcome back to the Todd Allbaugh Show on the Civic Media Radio Network. It is 9 before the hour of 2 o'clock at the top of the hour. Maggie Dawn takes over these airwaves after CBS or ABC News, depending upon which station you are listening to across the Civic Media Radio Network. We are joined, our ongoing contributor and co-host on Wednesdays, Mr. Trygve Olsen, now a senior advisor at the Lincoln Project. We are honored to have our guest this half hour. He is the author. As a matter of fact, we just got a text from a listener here on WMDX in Madison, said, I came in late. What is the name of the book that he's talking about? Thank you so very much for asking. It is called Minority Rule. Rule, the right-wing attack on the will of the people and the fight to resist it. You can do like I did and go to the West Side, Barnes & Noble, and get it right away, or I'm sure you could get it on the old Amazon or many other places wherever you buy your books. It's called Minority Rule. The author is Ari Berman. He is also a voting rights reporter for Mother Jones and appears on various network and cable shows across the country, and he's going to be here in Madison this Friday. You can see him in person. Are you going to sign books, Ari?
I will. Yep.
Look at that. Get your book autographed at the
I'll even
Wisconsin...
talk to you if you buy one.
Oh, my God. What a guy. What a guy. Wisconsin Book Festival. It is here at the Madison Central Library. Literally, I can see the roof where I'm standing outside of our windows right now. From 6 until 7 p.m., Wisconsin Book Festival at the Madison Central Library from 6 until 7. Any need to pre-register, Ari?
No. Just show up there, and I think it'll be a good crowd.
All right.
Are you going to buy him some beer and curds, Todd?
We'll buy Ari anything he wants. Sure.
You know what? I'm going to the Old Fashioned afterwards. I'm going to get a $5 brandy Old Fashioned, some curds.
Nice.
We literally, yesterday was
out.
National Cheese Curd Day, and we had old-fashioned cheese curds right here yesterday. So you picked a good spot.
So good.
You want to come on a tour of Wisconsin with Todd and I, in addition to right before the elections?
I know you guys know all the spots. I know you do.
Yeah,
we'll love that.
We'll show you some good places.
Yeah, we will. Only about 5.5, 6 minutes left here, guys. I want to get to this because, Ari, you brought it up going into the break. Trygve, you mention Walker all the time, and we joke around a little bit, but it's also very serious. It was during his reign when I left the Republican Party, working for my former boss, Senate Majority Leader Dale Schultz. There are people in this state, because I've talked to them, I've heard them, there are people in Janesville and in Green Bay who no longer golf in golf foursomes or go to Thanksgiving dinners because of division that Scott Walker created. Go ahead, and then Ari.
Yeah, I was saying to Ari during the break, what I talk about Scott Walker a lot, obviously, as listeners know, and what he did to the state. But what I had never really thought of until Ari mentioned it is how much that became a model for other places ideologically. When in reality, I think Scott was just doing it because he wanted to be president of the United States since Badger Boy State, and it was convenient to get him mentioned on Rush Limbaugh and Fox News and the places that you need to be covered. Yeah. And that is such an important point because in Wisconsin, it's just not who we are, and in places that are more right-wing, it's become something even sort of more toxic and probably played a role in the rise of Trump, Ari.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think those are all really good points. I mean, if you look back at Wisconsin history, Teddy Roosevelt praised Wisconsin as a laboratory for democratic reform. It gave rise to policies like Social Security and unemployment insurance and collective bargaining rights for unions. And it really personified the idea that despite, no matter what political party you were with, government should work for the common good. And of course, there was exceptions to that, like Joe McCarthy. But generally speaking, there was this Wisconsin idea, right? I mean, it's quite literally called the Wisconsin idea with regards to public education. And Walker had a very different idea. His idea was that government and democratic institutions should work for this conservative elite instead, and that it should represent people like the Bradley Foundation and the U-Lines and the people that were pouring all the money in to prop up this extreme agenda. And they knew very clearly that if they could do it in Wisconsin, they could pull it off anywhere. Because if you could go after unions in the state that gave birth to collective bargaining rights for unions, if you could roll back voter participation in a state that was always neck and neck with Minnesota for #1 in voter turnout, if you could gerrymander the state so that there was no competition, a state that was known for political competition, then you could export those policies anywhere. And Walker might not have intended to do that, but certainly once he got going, he realized that. And then the amount of money that went into Wisconsin, you look at the things they did, these are all things that radicalized the Republican Party. And the reason why I write so much about the post-2010 takeover of states like Wisconsin is because I believe this laid the groundwork for Trump. That if the Republican Party had not already radicalized on the state level, they would not have been open to a figure like Trump, right? Because if you have already basically turned your back on democracy, if you then say, I'm going to support someone like Donald Trump for president. So I think too often when we write the histories of Trump, it's always focused on one guy, right? And the unique
Right.
threat he poses to the democratic system. And of course, Trump is a unique threat, but he's not alone in terms of the radicalization against democracy we've seen. And Wisconsin has played such a big part in that story.
Ari Berman, the book is Minority Rule, 45 seconds. What do you hope people at the end of the day, the big thing they take away from this book?
Well, I hope they take away that the problem we're facing is bigger than Trump. It's deeper than Trump, and people have to do something about it at both the national and the state level. So I think it's really important to pay attention to the states and then pay attention all the way up and down the ballot to the states. Because as I said, it was the state legislature in Wisconsin that was so much of a driver of the radicalization against democracy there, that I hope people understand that what happens at the bottom of the ticket has as much impact as what happens at the top of the ticket as well.
Ari Berman, great author, also with Mother Jones. The book is entitled Minority Rule. Get it wherever you get books. Also, stop in and see him at the Wisconsin Book Festival at the Madison Central Library this Friday from 6 until 7. We'll put all that information in our show notes. Ari, thank you so very much. Can't wait to have you out here in Wisconsin.
Todd, Trygve, great to see you. Look forward to coming out tomorrow.
Our pleasure.